Hey everyone, welcome back to the Primal Blueprint podcast. If you're listening to this episode, it is also a video episode as well on YouTube. So we will put the link in the show notes to that. Today, my guest is Selina Gray. You can go to selinagray.com, and that's Gray. First name Selina, selinagray.com. She helps entrepreneurs call in more revenue and release shame around money. Wow, Selina, I'm glad you're here because so many people have got issues with money. I know I did. I still think there's some I got to get over. Let's go through this. First of all, welcome and tell us, how did you get into this?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to dive into this topic because it's an unspoken in our society. It's always been, a generational, don't have open money conversations, put it under the rug. And that's certainly how I grew up. It was, a small town in Canada where I grew up, and it was, middle class family. And my mom would say, she bought something for $20, and I was always curious about money, and I'd say, no, it's 1997. And she'd, give me an eye roll and be like, what is wrong with this kid? I was really interested in numbers. And I just realized through the course of my life that most people have problems with money and numbers. And so through my childhood, I started getting curious and I started taking on odd jobs. I grew up in the 80s, so there was no hustler term back then, but I certainly was a hustler. I had all the odd jobs, and I really loved to have money because I knew early on it gave me some freedom. And I think that really sparked my curiosity. And as I grew up, I started, taking on more and more money, and I had some traumatic events like we all do around money, but couldn't talk to anyone about it. So it just became, something within me that rose up and rose up. And my very first, real job, if you will, I was really an overachiever from birth. That's like imprinted in my DNA. I became a controller for an international oil and gas company at the age of 23. And so I flew across the globe from Canada to Africa, and I landed in my new role and was like completely amazed at how, hard work and dedication got me to the other side of the world at a young age. And I was like immediately excited about the opportunity to have wealth and earn income. And, fast forward a good 7 years of overworking, 120-hour work weeks, and, really becoming obsessive about wealth and ending up in the hospital for over 20 days with IV steroids and blood transfusions. My doctor came into my room and said, Selina, your career is over. And at that point, my entire life had been about praise and power and amassing wealth because I wanted to retire early. I had big dreams, and all of those dreams came crashing down. And it was through that experience that I really became awoken to my unhealthy relationship to money. And I started, post-hospital researching this concept of wealth and how we all have it wrong. And I stumbled across the words conscious wealth. And from that moment on, in 2011, I became really dedicated. I dedicated my life and my career and entrepreneurship towards diving into this topic of relationship to money. I'm a formally trained CPA. I've been a CPA for many years. And I just realized through my formal numbers training, we never talked about beyond the numbers, the impact of money in relationships, the impact of money in careers. And so through that process from 2011 onwards, I've really dived into this topic. So that's a long-winded opening, but what I'm saying is money's unspoken. It took me, really a long time, 28 years of my life, to realize I have this all wrong. Money is not about numbers. It's about something else. And I really want others to learn the same. So,
and this is why lottery winners, 9% of them, all lose their money. It's not because they're total dummies about it. The total dummy stuff about it is usually related to they have some guilt, or there's issues about it, or they don't feel they deserve it, or you know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. It's not all strictly numbers. You're right. And you have a list on your website of things that are like, you might have a problem with money if, these are things. And I want to, any money conversations in any way. This would bother me because I never wanted to look and deal with money. I hate it. I don't like math. I don't want to bother with it. So my problem was always if someone brought up in my family, hey, you should really do a budget. I'm like, I don't want to, I'd get angry. I wouldn't want to talk about it. I was just avoiding it. So I know we avoid it. We avoid the conversations, and then there's so many others. Let's go into a couple of them because that's an obvious one. But the one that's I think can be a lot for people is not feeling worthy of a partner because you aren't worth enough. Like, well, why would they want to be with me? I don't have enough money. Can we talk about that one a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely. There's layers of money mindset. And I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that our relationship with money started out from the moment of birth, and it's going to continue on with us, all the way until our life ends. And that may sound morbid, but it's really important for us to recognize that it's hard for us to have a really, open, well communicated experience with another human unless we can do that and show up for ourselves. So number one, when we're thinking about our relationships, in addition to, like tough conversations or fighting, we also have to remember that there's an identity, how we feel about ourselves, our own worthiness. And I often speak of the term inner richness. And what I mean about that is really connecting to a positive sense of self. And that's our worthiness. And if we're not able to understand that just because we are human and we are worthy, it's hard for us to see our value through the lens of a relationship, whether that's a career, whether that's love, any type of relationship. It's hard for us to grasp. And so for anyone listening, if you feel supercharged about money, it's often connected to worthiness in some way, shape, or form. And it's often connected to our past. I take clients through an exercise called the money timeline. And what it is just getting acquainted with our experiences that were both positive and negative throughout our life, especially in those formative years where our brain created automatic programming with, neurons. So we really wanted to get clear on why we're saying to ourselves, I can't afford that. Those neural pathways have just created automations for us, and we may not want that. And so if we're like, nope, I'm not worthy, there's somewhere in our past where that originated. And we've not been taught to think that way about money. There's somewhere, our perception of an experience that imprinted within us that we're not worthy. And that is now in the lens of our reality today. So when we're thinking about money in a global sense, it's much deeper than numbers. So as it relates to our relationships, we have to take stock of how we feel about our own worth. And that's foundational money work for me. And part of that work is just to start paying attention to how we speak to ourselves. Like if we're, doing something for other people, asking why. Why we always want to help others, and are we willing to do that same thing for ourselves? And, just getting a level of awareness, because it's not intuitive. We've not been taught to think about money as an inner richness, as a worthiness, but it's foundational because then we can start understanding why we don't like budgets and other things, because it's all interconnected. And relationship to self is the very first one before we can really honor relationships with other people.
Really, really well said. The other one that I think is funny is, again, like feeling, you bring up, teaching that money is evil or rich people are bad or evil. And, I remember this comment of, it was like someone's friend's mother, they were walking by a marina and there was a very expensive yacht, one of those like multi-million, and they were just like, must be nice.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that comment is the reason you're never going to have a yacht like that, right? Because it's this belief system that you have about like, oh, that must be nice for them. Like, and that's really saying like, they have it, I can't, or I feel they're frivolous to buy that yacht. You're judging the way other people spend their money. I think that's one thing people don't look at. Like if you're looking around going, that's so dumb, I can't believe they, like, if I had that money, I would, it's like, oh boy, check yourself, right?
Yes, and it's an automatic separateness that those people are somehow different from us. And I think that is the real belief system. It goes again back to the worthiness. Like our auto response is must be nice. But what's the emotion behind that? And often it's sadness or disassociation from our own worthiness. Like that could never be my life. We don't allow ourselves to dream. If we did a poll of 100 people walking by that yacht, be very interesting to see how many of them would be like, oh, that's going to be me someday, because that's not intuitive in our society. And what I really practice in the concept of honoring our connection to currency is getting clear about those beliefs and where they began. So likely someone in that family unit, that core family unit, a parent or a grandparent may have said, oh, must be nice for those rich people to do X, Y, Z. And that continued on. Maybe that became something you noticed. It was part of the family language, or there was just a separateness. Like, we're different from rich people and therefore they're bad because we fear what we don't know. And so it's getting curious about that languaging and to say, like, maybe a yacht is too far away. But what if I just thought, what would it feel like to be a wealthy person? How would I show up? What would that lack of separateness feel like? What could it feel like to be whole? And for a lot of people, when they think about wealth being something bad, there's a disassociation from worth. So what if you allowed yourself to think, wow, if I had that money, I could give more and create a ripple effect. Like, maybe I could have a yacht, but then I can also show up for other people, because there's often association with rich people just hoarding money. And so you can recreate what wealth means, and it's just a definition of your own. So I love that yacht reference, because for everyone listening to this, I want you to think about what your first gut reaction was to the yacht experience, and not to shame it one way or the other. Just get curious about, like, oh, where have I heard this before? Is that, my mom's voice or my uncle's voice? And not to shame it, but to get curious, because that's how we start understanding our money programming, which just lives in our subconscious mind, that automatic programming I'm speaking of. We can start paying attention to it and saying, like, is this something I want to actually think? We forget that we have a choice in this, that we can start saying, like, wow, what if I'm just like, amazing for them, amazing for them. And I hope they're spreading so much good with that wealth. I know I would. And what would it look like for me? And allow yourself to dream, because we create this energetic ceiling in our thinking about what's possible for us. And if we create separateness with rich people not being us and ourselves, it can become fear-based. And so what if we allow ourselves to dream and remove that ceiling and just get curious? It doesn't automatically create a difference, but that opens the conversation. It opens the door to new thinking. And that's what inner richness is about.
That's amazing. And also, too, this one is interesting. If you're afraid what your community will think if you stop being a, quote, starving artist, you can insert any job identity that's linked to struggle, low compensation. And again, this is the thing. For alphas in general, there's a struggle life cycle, but sometimes people, it doesn't matter what area of your life is, you might have a belief about struggle in that area. Like, relationships are always a struggle, then they continue to be, and you attract that. Same with money. So let's talk about this concept of struggle. And also, again, this, I would say, hey, what other people think of you is none of your business, and go rock it. But again, if you're part of this community, let's say everyone's poor and now you're starting a business, you're starting to get very successful, you might feel this disconnect. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and this separateness again. And there's an inherent level of belonging that we all have. And money is already spoken in our society. So if we're too different with money, and if we've grown up in a community where we really value creativity, or we really feel like we have to give everything away, because that's another component of that, we're often missing the point that the more we have, the more we can give, and that ripple effect is limitless. And so for anyone feeling that way, come back home to what you feel is possible for you. Often there's a ceiling, like I spoke about earlier. There's a ceiling when we're earning in a specific job, and it's like creativity or money. It's one or the other. And why can't we have both? What would it look like if we had both? And it's also a matter of whose opinion you're listening to. And often we don't think about ourselves. Like, I've had plenty of clients who've, left professions like being a lawyer, for example, to go do photography. And part of that was a conscious choice. They knew they were leaving money to go into photography, something they loved. But what they forgot about was that you don't have to give up money. Who says that anyways? It's become something of an expectation that if you're happy, there can't be money associated with it. Like, she was choosing creativity. And so we just started questioning that, saying, like, well, why can't you have both? And I want you to ask that for yourself. What's blocking you from it? And it's often societal pressure. It's this expectation that we have to be creative, but we can't have happiness. And if we can intertwine what that looks like, and then find someone to model who's done it as well. Look for someone who's like a actually accomplished it, or get a mentor or a money mindset coach to really link into that worthiness, to link into what's possible, because it's hard to do these things alone. If we're surrounded by community members who have the exact same mindset than us, it's hard to break free of that. But key to all of it is understanding that it's possible and there's an opportunity for worthiness for us, that we deserve it, that we deserve to have money, and money is not bad. There's an underlying link there that if we value money, we're bad, or if we value money, we can't go after our dreams. And so understanding that disconnect from self, that disconnect in community, and just saying like, what would it look like for me to have both? So that we can start visualizing what's possible for us, and then finding community members who've already had that be their reality and striving towards it so it feels more possible, I think is really imperative. And the relationship to money is an ongoing process. It's an understanding of our beliefs, which ones we want to keep and which ones we want to release. And these types of questions are imperative for us all, because that ceiling that we have in our mind with money, it really guides us. If we discount something immediately saying like, oh, well, that's too much money because I'm in a creative field, you know, I can't charge that. That's way too much. Who's saying that, and why? And why can't you go after it? So step one for me is always acknowledging that these things are living within us. And step two is to say, is this something I want to continue to do? Because the richness lives within. And like you said, we don't always have to look to external places. We have to go within and say, what do I really want? Because there's an underlying restlessness within all of us to go after what we were destined to do. And if we don't listen to it, the universe comes by with those cosmic 2x4s. And that's exactly what happened in my life. You know, I was going after external validation. I was going after money and wealth, and I wasn't living my truth. And the universe was like, wait a second, we're going to smack you in the head until you get this. And so if you've been living in a world where that 2x4 is coming at you, start asking yourself questions like, what is this teaching me? Is there a lesson from this? And how is it connected to my relationship with money, which is simply my relationship with self, the energy I have with something, the creativity I possess, the energy of wanting more. All of that is within us, and we've not been taught to foster it. So if you're in a creative field, celebrate it. And then ask yourself, what can I do with more? And if the immediate feeling is negative, go, where does that live and why did it get there? And if it's positive, continue to foster that.
You know, I had a mini one come up not too long ago. Even though I'm a coach, we hire coaches too, right? Coaches need coaches sometimes. Sometimes, you know, even though I have coaches that are friends, I want to actually give money and have the exchange to someone who's a professional and does it, because they're really going to do the work with me versus a friend who might chat for a little bit, but, you know, they're going to really do the work. So there were some things that I kind of wanted to manifest, and I hired a law of attraction coach. I already do the law of attraction. I know it. I had a moment. She told me how much. And as I pressed the paid button, I did have a moment where I was like, is this like kind of, I mean, like I already, you know, I could do this myself. Is this kind of a waste? I had a little couple of seconds of judging it and then feeling like, you know, I shouldn't be doing this right now. This is like just a extra thing. Like, come on. And then literally I just went, hold on a minute. And I said to myself, no, you're investing in you. This shit's going to come back twofold.
Yes.
The next day, it did. I got a bunch of new clients, and it equaled the money that I paid for the coach. I'm not surprised, but I have also adopted that belief system, right? But again, I had to switch that from, I don't, like, there's some kind of deserving there, or judging it on whether it was right or right timing or worthwhile or whether it was worth it. Again, putting this value on it. And then I had to go, no, here's the value. I'm investing in myself. And it's going to come back. And it did right away because I changed my mindset in that moment. But listen, not that this stuff's still going to not pop up, but you have to observe that, right? Because I was observing. I'm like, wait, why am I? No, hold on. No, I'm investing in myself.
Yourself through it. It could have easily have taken you out. You'd not invested in it, and it would have shifted your energy. I'd love to talk about that for a second, because I feel like for a lot of us, we're like, no, we can do it on our own. You know, we don't want to hire out the help or all those things. And especially as entrepreneurs, we need to stay in our zone of excellence, our zone of genius. It keeps our energy flowing. It keeps us high vibe. It helps us attract our clients, like we're speaking about with law of attraction. But when we're going to invest, there can be that like you say, belief system that comes up, the old programming that's like, do we really need it? And I love to have my clients do this, to just create a little checklist. You can do it in your smartphone, whatever it is, to remind yourself that you are worthy, and to come back to like, why am I doing this? And often if we're just exchanging services with maybe a friend, but there's no money exchanged, there's a difference. We don't show up the same. And I like to say, when we put the money, in, there's skin in the game. We show up with different energy. And we are also paying for a learning curve, or to go warp speed, or some level of accountability, or a specific mindset tool, or a strategy. And all of that together can really get us to the next place of our own growth as a coach, or as, an entrepreneur. And that's the critical piece about investing in ourselves. If we're only allowing the money to stop us, what are we losing on the other side of that exchange? We really want to create a checklist to be like, what's happening here for me with my worthiness if I don't want to invest? Because what will change if you don't invest? Pretty much nothing, because we would have been able to accomplish what we're doing. We can't get to that next place doing what we're doing now. It's just something we want to consider with investing. So I love what you said there, having accountability, really revising our belief system, and investing in ourselves can really catapult us to the next level. But we may not be able to do it if our awareness around our own money blocks are really stopping us.
I'm glad you mentioned the exchange. So this has happened. Okay, so like as a thyroid author and in general a coach, there are plenty of other people I've even interviewed that have thyroid problems. And then, of course, they want my advice. They want me to look at their labs. And the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, my gosh, I'm doing all of these free favors for like all of these people that are kind of strangers, not like my best friend. So right. I was like, well, I got to go back to remembering this woman who invented the word hypnobirthing for hypnosis and birthing. It was Michelle LeClaire O'Neill. She's great. She's in her 70s now. But she always used to say she would work with underprivileged youth and teen pregnancy and stuff like that. She goes, I don't care how much money they had. I would make them hand me the dollar. And I remembered that, and I thought, I'm going to have to start doing it. So I did. I had a couple of people I interviewed. They had thyroid problems, and I said, hey, look, if you can't pay my rate, that's cool. I'm happy to give you like the co-author, buddy interview kind of podcasting discount, but there has to be an exchange of money. So, how about this? And maybe it's a nominal amount. It happened today with a friend who's a good friend whose wife's going through some thyroid stuff, and they're dealing with the pandemic and they're living off their savings. And I said, $5, but we just need something. I don't care how dumb it is, but I need an exchange. And they're like, we can do more. I'm like, don't worry. I know you're something, but I need an exchange. And it feels so much better to do that, just to have the vibrational exchange, even if it's a nominal amount. So I'm kind of glad you mentioned that, because the people out there who are coaches and entrepreneurs, this is something worthwhile.
And the energy is critical. Even when we're working on an offering as a coach or an entrepreneur, and we're putting together a package, and if we're thinking, oh, nobody's gonna buy this, or we're like, I need 20 people to buy this, and you're attaching that urgent energy to what you're creating, it repels people. Money is simply a reflection of who we are, where we're at. And so if we're building something and you really believe in it, and the value proposition of what you're putting out is priced correctly, and the value coming in of what they're buying, it feels really good. And so that exchange you speak of is imperative. When we're exchanging money, it changes the energy of what we're doing. But as a coach, we also want to be pricing correctly. Like what you said was brilliant. You're like, look, they might be in a situation where they can't put all of the money towards my fair market value pricing. Well, you may decide as a coach to have, a couple scholarship tickets, but have some skin in the game for them, and then really come back to your own worth and say, like, is that scholarship offering enough? And then really make sure the rest of your offering, you're charging your worth, because that value proposition of like what you give as a coach to what you receive for value in your company is important, because that's where we can fall into those mind traps too of over giving.
That is such a classic alpha female pitfall, and it's one that I've had to get out of. I'm a naturally helpful person. I like super connecting people and helping, people achieve things. But again, it's I just had to make that. It was happening too much, and it didn't feel right to do it for free. But you know what? Even if it was like one person, I was like, I only charged them $20, which is, nothing compared to my rate. And it still felt so good to that felt right that I got something for my time. There was a vibrational shift versus me walking away and being like, God, just another hour or two, and
Yeah, and then you're resentful,
right,
and that can
which
create
is my
some.
fault, not theirs. Yeah,
Yeah, and it can create some trauma for you in your money story because you're like,
right.
why will I continue to do this? Because it makes me feel resentful and lacks boundaries. And that's an important piece in our relationship to money. If we're continuing to see resentment as a coach or as an entrepreneur, it's an invitation to really review our money boundaries and our
Yes.
general boundaries, because energy vampire clients are the same. We want to have that value proposition of how we show up and the value people receive to be appropriate. And so that too is related to our money. And you may say that doesn't feel connected. But I help women entrepreneurs. I run year-long masterminds around this. As we continue to build up our own worthiness, who we attract and how we have boundaries around this is imperative. So for everyone listening, charge your worth and do the work around that, because it gives other people permission to do the same and to receive what's appropriate for the value given.
And they will take it way more seriously when they're paying for it, no matter what. That is 100% the truth. Yeah, I helped someone a long time ago who was sort of a friend of a friend, sort of the beginning of my coaching. And it ended up, if I added it over time, oh my gosh, I regretted not charging them something. And they didn't take it seriously for lots of the times. But again, it was like a friend of a family member, and I said to myself, no, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to get into that, roped into that again.
I want to say one more thing on that.
Yeah.
Often we can take on other people's money story. And what I mean by that is we can say like, oh, well, they may not have enough funds. I'm not going to charge them X, Y, Z. And we can come up with a lot of excuses why we shouldn't charge our worth. And I'm not saying this is universal, but certainly something to think about. True. I've had clients before where they're, building up the second year of their business. And they're like, oh, I'm not really sure if I should send this invoice. And I'll say to them, like, whose money story is that? Are you taking on their money story? You can always have money conversations with clients, with your spouse, with your kids, anyone, because it helps understand where people sit, and you don't want to take on other people's stories. We want to honor the exchange and the value given in it so we can spin out in that. So I just wanted to wrap that with a bow to say, like, be cognizant of how we're receiving information from others too. We don't want to make up money stories from other people. If that's their truth, then fine. You can meet that where it is and problem solve. But we can do some tricky things with money. We can make up stories about our own worth. And it's coming back to that, like, is this honoring me? I think that's imperative for us all in our relationship with money to say, like, is this in my highest and best? Is this in my client's highest and best? What honors me? Or is this a wound that needs to be healed? Is this something that's inviting me to see a result and learn from it? And that's important as an entrepreneur, because I've said this many times. There's nothing like owning our own business to have our wounds thrown up in our face, right? Like they don't teach us how to run cash flow and charge our worth, and then you're managing all these different moving parts, and we only have so much energy. And with our relationship to money, we have to be very conscious about how we're expending that energy. Every day we only have so much energy, and honoring our boundaries. Listening to how we're showing up for our clients, those relationships, it's all tied to how we value ourselves and our own worthiness. It's all relationship to money work.
This is, I'm gonna have to go through one of your programs. I'm gonna do one of these things, because I love this topic, and I just think that, again, the more you're fueled it in by an expert such as you, the better you're gonna get at it. Even though you can think you can tackle it alone, sometimes on these things you can't, because it's not my area of expertise. It's my least area of expertise is yours, and I'm sure thyroid is your least, or whatever.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
What are some other things we need to think about? I mean, we have this list of, like, okay, there's people who, like, no matter how much they make, they can't keep a positive balance, or they make all this money, but it's never enough. There's lots of these stories. What are some things that, aside from working with you, and we'll get to, like, all the things that you offer, because you're so amazing, and I think a lot of people listening would be like, oh man, I need her. But what are some things we can start to do now? We can look at the relationship to money or our comments about money. What are some other practical sort of tips and tricks that we can, 3 to 5, that we can think about now to go, all right, I need to get my money shit together?
Yeah, I love this because it's mindset, but it's also strategy based. So when we first started this discussion, I heard you say, like, oh, budget, and then you, like, seize up all the way, So one of the things I'd love for everyone to think about is your relationship to the word budget, because we've been taught to see a budget as restrictive and that it takes away all the fun. And I once had a client rename the word budget and connect their spending only to joy. And I say this like with a caveat. So how I believe we should spend is a direct reflection of how we choose to love ourselves. And I want to say that again. How you're choosing to spend and nourish your life is how you're choosing to love yourself. So I want you to start paying attention to how you're spending. Simply, you could record it for a week or a day and note down everything you're spending and then attribute whether it brings you joy or not. And start being really cognizant to the emotions around your money, more so than the numbers. So for example, a lot of financial experts are like, cut out that Starbucks, because by the end of 20 years, you'll have X amount of dollars. And I'm not saying that's not valid, because it absolutely is. But money is more emotional than that. And I want us to still have simple joys. So if you're someone who needs to save everything, especially in the climate that we're living now with economics, et cetera, allow yourself some joy. And don't allow yours to be impacted by anyone else. Like, decide which number you're willing to give yourself monthly. If it's $5, and enjoy the heck out of it.
Yeah,
and
enjoy that one Starbucks latte, damn it. Maybe you don't do it every day, but get it in there. Yeah.
Yes, and start paying attention to your relationship with numbers. So watch that spending. And then if you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're in a career, every time money enters your life, I want you to celebrate it. So that's a tip number 2. So one of the things that I really love is, the other day I had a friend drop off a bouquet of flowers to my front door. And normally, of course, that brings you joy. But I took a second to send her blessings and just bless the abundance that entered my life. Fresh nature, flowers, money is in all things. When a client buys your $7 tripwire in your course, take a moment when that PayPal link comes in, say their name out loud, send them a blessing. And it doesn't have to be, anything more than, thank you for trusting in me. I hope everything in my course brings you the value you hope to receive. And it sends
love this.
It sends an energetic force out to them. And I had a client who was in the US, and she was really overwhelmed in the busyness of her luxury skincare line. And she was reaching a point where it felt hard to package everything. And then, with that heaviness, her sales started to slow. And I said, let's just take a pause. And every time someone buys, we're just going to send them blessings. And then you're going to bless the box that you ship out. And in one day, she got $7,000 extra in sales. She's like, wow, this works. She's like, I'm a believer. And these are the things we cannot explain, but the strategy is to show up with intention, to just be in gratitude, to thank people. And then the opposite side, when we're shopping, we're getting our organic food to nourish our body, do the same thing. Give thanks for the beautiful meal you're going to have with that food, and start thinking about how you spend and if it's nourishing your life, if it's choosing to love. And if it's not, we can feel really constricted by our limitations in spending. Like maybe you have a house that you felt you needed. Some people through this experience realize, no, I just want a tiny apartment. I don't need a big house, because it's more than numbers. And I'm not saying you all have to sell your houses, but I want you to start paying attention to when someone buys your program, or, decides to engage with you as an entrepreneur, or you receive your paycheck as a career person, just give a blessing and say thank you, and start doing random joy. Like you can start smiling at people on the street. I love that experiment. It's literally abundance. It's positive energy. Start tracking how that shows up in your life. So those are some strategic.
You know what I love on that note is it made me think of, I got this one from Cassie Parks, but sometimes let's say someone gives you something, right? Not even as a gift, just like, oh, I have this extra thing I didn't need or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, I've been wanting a pan like that to cook with. Add it up.
Yes.
Because so sometimes being an influencer, right, in general, I don't really rep a lot of, there's only really 2 companies that but people are offering free stuff all the time. And occasionally, I'll try something. And if I like it, I like it. But I'm not just going to promote stuff I don't care about or don't like. Yeah, but sometimes the stuff. Huh?
Feeling aligned? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I'm feeling aligned, but sometimes I'm not. But still, I might get something. And regardless of whether I like it or not, I'm always just I might even look it up online if there's a website to see the value of it and be like, oh my gosh, I just got a free $50 today. Or just things like that. I think this is really good to put those things in terms of money too, if that makes.
And don't ever forget too, like if it doesn't feel aligned for you and maybe you gift it to your friend or you leave it in a donation pile, remember that someone else will feel joy from that. And I've had a client do this where, maybe you're at the coffee shop and you're going to pay for 2 coffees and tell the barista, like, if someone's looking like they're having a down day, just let them have this coffee, on me. And I've had clients where literally the woman would come in and be like, oh, I lost my husband. This coffee means more to me than you'll ever know. And so we never know the ripple effect of good around money. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be tremendous value in other ways. And so don't judge how money enters your life. Celebrate it. That's a really critical thing. And decide how you choose to love yourself with money. But start honoring the part of you who resists tracking numbers. Like start automating and using, things like mint.com, things like that to help you track your money, because we're meant to function with money in a very, honorable, nourishing way. But if we're resisting looking at money, it's appropriate to get curious about it. We don't have to like every system, but I encourage you to start really getting clear with the numbers, because that's from a place of power. That's a place of wealth, and not just from a numbers perspective, but honoring the part of you who wants to feel rich inside. We have to get right with our numbers and start picturing yourself in this way of like, how can money enter my life? Have it become a ritual that you're going to start checking in on your bank balances every day and watch the emotion that comes up and get curious about it instead of shaming yourself, and just have a little fun. That's my last tip. Like, don't take money so seriously. We've been taught that when money enters our life, if it leaves, it's never coming back. That's not true. Money is around us in all forms. So if you've had, a situation where you lost $10,000 for some reason, we often think it can't come back to us. That's not true. Lean into your gifts. Start brainstorming ways that you can welcome money in your life. Inside my 12-month program, when the pandemic hit this year, we're like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And one of the ladies was like, now's the time. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to really step into my truth. And she did, a $25,000 launch when everyone was saying it's not possible. And so why I'm bringing this up is we're only limited by the power of ourselves and the power of our mind. Exactly. So when we're working on practical money tips, just be really aware of how you use money to nourish yourself. Start paying attention to those numbers. Get the budget a new name. I had a client who named their budget Gertrude because it was their favorite aunt and made them happy when they thought of it. Pick your own. Start, really celebrating how money enters your life. Give blessings out to people who are in an exchange of money with you. Leverage systems wherever possible. And I want every single person to have a dream team, a financial dream team. We spoke about this briefly earlier, but it's costing you too much to not stay in your zone of genius. If you're working at home right now and you're looking over at that laundry pile and you're like, well, I should do the laundry, really decide what your skills are, own them if you're an entrepreneur, and hire those other things out, because you can earn so much more in your zone of genius. You can, stay in that positive flow energy. And then you're supporting other entrepreneurs too. That cleaning lady has a business, or that cleaning person has a business, whatever it is. The ripple effect is so much bigger than us. And really establish how you feel about what wealth means to you, because you can change it. Richness lives within. And so deciding how you spend to choose to love yourself, really getting clear on what numbers mean, that's a good first step. It's a level of awareness. And my favorite thing about money is that every morning you wake up, you can redecide your relationship. It's, a new day. Even if you have tremendous debt, I've had people wipe out debt in, minutes, basically, if they decided. Like, I've had clients say they don't want to do retreats anymore. Great. What do you want to do? And take that energy into something else and wipe out debt. It's really, it sounds easy. It is easy. It's simple, but it's hard to execute. So money, the biggest thing for me is your mindset. Start leaning into your worth and paying attention to how money nourishes your life, and where you feel blocked, get curious. Get curious about that and say, is this something I want to keep? Start shifting your wording from I can't afford that to I buy things that I value. And so that can help shift, like, if do I value this? Great, then I can afford it. That creates energetic ceiling. So there's a few little practical tips mixed in with some mindset work that are easy to execute, and you can continue to track your results.
Tell us, obviously we can go to selinagray.com. We'll put everything in the show notes. How can we work with you? Do you work one-on-one? Is it just a course? Give me a rundown of what you got available, because I definitely will want to jump in on one of these things.
Thank you so much. So you can come find me at Selina G Money. I also have a free Facebook group called She's a Money Boss. So any of the ladies who have entrepreneurship in their horizon or in their truth, come join us there. But where my specialty lies is relationship with money, especially as it relates to the entrepreneur. So I do DIY courses, relationship to money, Money Boss Academy, Calling in Abundance. Those are my digital courses. But I also have year-long programs for women entrepreneurs. So my Wealth Accelerator, it's a transformational thing where we have women who join who may be cash flowing, 6 figures or 7 figures, but are just blocked. I've had a gal in there, she made $500,000 a year, but couldn't find the funds to pay herself. And that's a critical thing. At every level, we go through different growth stages. And so I've had the gamut of people just starting their business to multiple 7 figures. And the critical piece is honoring the money work along with the business work, making sure we have that financial dream team, like a bookkeeper and a CPA and a lawyer to review our contracts. That helps keep us in our power. I alluded to the dream team before. That's what I was referring to. So inside that year-long container, it creates transformation where women just catapult. And then I do small men's groups as well to help them really work on that money mindset. And so I've got various levels of that accelerator. That's where my heart and soul lives. I love serving those women so much. And then lastly, I take a couple of one-on-one transformations per year. It's a 6-month experience where we go all through those belief systems. We dig into, where some of those foundational traumas lived in childhood and work our way to how we can start honoring life. And I want to just say a couple of things. We forget what's possible in our relationship to money. We think that's for someone else and not us. And what I've witnessed after working with thousands of amazing humans over the last, 9 years is that anything is possible. I've had people create a business in a few short years, get to 300,000. Now we're getting close to 2 million 2 years later. And that person didn't think that they were ever going to be able to do that. So wherever you are today, be gentle with yourself. Start following your joy. Lean into that accountability. Start paying attention to your money mindset. Find a community that is doing the work alongside you. Keep listening to this podcast, keep leaning in. And that's just my hope for all people, is that we need to lift the veil on how we view money. And I am just dedicated to crushing that, because when we get that really connection is currency piece, everything changes. Our personal life becomes more harmonious. We nourish our spending, and our business blasts off, and we can earn, but we need the systems to catch the profit so that it helps, not only us, but people who are our clients, or, other people who we may be giving charitable donations to. So ultimately, if you're listening to this and going, oh, this feels like a lot of work, it's only as important as breathing. When we think about money, it's in all things.
You can't get out of this life cycle with money. You have to be in it, unless you go live on a co-op or something. Commune.
Yeah, and it's the worst thing. And I've had clients who've had trust funds. They do this work too, negative dollars to $50 million. The work is the same, because there's a human element to the shame around money, and we all have it. So be gentle with yourself, have fun with it, and know that every morning you can create a new relationship with it. But wealth begins within.
I love it. Thank you so much for the discussion. I love this so much, and we'll have to have you back on again sometime. And we'll put everything in the show notes to connect with Selina and all of the work that all the work she does, and everything to help you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
My pleasure.